check this out. This is the final result of this track. First off, welcome to this episode. It's the final episode of making cinematic trance in Reaper. Sorry for the 2-week silence. I was literally trying to decide between using my real voice and using text to speech. So I realized that using text to speech is a bit more work. You have to write, generate, edit, process. Yeah, you get the idea. It's a bit extreme, and honestly, you can't make jokes with text to speech. So I decided, I'm gonna use my own voice, even though I don't have a mic yet. I can record on my phone and then process that in Reaper. At least I can get a decent vocal narration, which doesn't have to be that, then in the coming weeks, months, once I get a microphone, at least the quality of the voice is gonna improve. So, my mixing process. For me, the way I approach this is that once I'm done working on a project creatively, I export the stems. Then after exporting the stems, I open up a new project, either in Reaper or sometimes in another DAW. Then I import the stems. Then after importing the stems is when now I can start the mixing process. Okay. I know some people prefer to mix and master their tracks in the same project, but I think for me, it's never worked for me because, you may want to go back to an initial point of reference, and you have some tracks in MIDI, some tracks in audio. You have some sense, so I know it works for some people, but for me, I prefer to export the stems so that they give you the freedom. You can mix in any DAW, send them to someone else. You can do whatever you want with the stems that you have exported. So, do I use Reaper for mixing and mastering? Well, I used to use it a few months back. I think even last year I was using Reaper, the early part of last year I was using Reaper for mixing and mastering. But once I tried Luna, I was like, damn. So now I use Luna for my mixing process. I really like the workflow that it gives you. So that's what I'm gonna show you besides Reaper today. Well, what plugins do I use for mixing? Contrary to what you may see in some tutorials with complex mixing and mastering chains, I actually use very, very few plugins to mix and master. Okay? So let me show you the plugins that I am using for mixing and mastering. So the first plugin that I use for mixing and mastering is the Pultec EQ. I use this mostly for tone shaping. Then I use the IK Multimedia's Equal EQ. This is more for the precision cuts. Okay, whenever I want to roll off the low end at a precise frequency, this is the go-to tool for the precision cuts. Okay. Then I do use the IK Multimedia's bus compressor mostly for dynamics, and I also use this mostly for the percussion and drums. Then whenever I want more finer control, I always use the Bax EQ or the EQ81, which are also very, very good emulations for mixing in my process. Then there's the UJAM UFX reverb. Well, you might be asking, why do I use a reverb for mixing and mastering. So sometimes you may have elements in your track, more so percussion elements like hi-hats or maybe claps that feel like they are not in the same space. So I use like 5 to 15% and make the mix cohesive together. Okay. Then the final plugin I use mostly on the master chain is just the IK Stealth Limiter. I really like this one because as compared to mixing and mastering plugins with the lots of controls, knobs, switches, and overwhelming stuff. This one has very few controls, as you can see, 2 knobs and a bunch of buttons. So it's very easy for a beginner and an intermediate producer who's beginning or who has been making their tracks for a while and or hasn't yet mastered using the more advanced plugins for mixing and mastering. Okay, so this is my go-to tools. I do use some other tools, but I don't use them as exporting the stems from Reaper. Well, the first thing you need to do is to create a folder where your stems will be held. Okay, it's as simple as renaming it something like stems or whatever you want. Okay, so of course the next thing is to hit the Reaper's render option, and now when this render option comes up, you realize that Reaper gives you a ton of flexibility. You can export in groups. Like, let's say maybe you want to export your bass lines first, then the drums, okay, then I don't know, percussions. You can do that just by selecting those elements, render them, then come back, select the others. Some people like that workflow. Some like to select all the stems once and export them in one go. That also works. So just if you like that, just select everything and let Reaper handle the job. So as you realize, Reaper is very versatile. It gives you tons of exporting formats, wave format, and all these other formats. But for mixing, it's highly recommended that you use the wave format because you don't want to mix your track. You don't want to mix MP3 stems. So wave always works because you can drag the stems into a different DAW. You can send it to someone else. So these are simple controls or simple options that anyone can do. Okay. For the more advanced options that you are seeing here, maybe you need to do a little bit of research into them before you start playing with them. Otherwise, I'd suggest that you leave everything as it and hit render. Okay. So let's do that. Okay, now that we have exported the stems from Reaper, let's take a look at Luna. So quick note before I dive in, I'm not claiming to be an expert here. I'm far from being one. I only have a laptop and headphones. So this is just my preference. This is just my process, the way I like to work. Your approach might be different, and that's completely fine. Okay, there is no right or wrong way here. You just work the way that fits your workflow. Okay, so like I said before, in Reaper I focus on the creative process, the creativity, writing MIDI melodies, bass lines, okay, layering and arrangement. That's all I do in Reaper. Okay, I don't worry too much about compression. I don't know. extreme limiting or refining the sound at that stage. Okay, that is why when I'm done with the layering and sequencing in Reaper, I export the stems and then import them into Luna, which allows me now to shift my mental perspective from a creative workflow to more of a logic kind of workflow, that now I no longer have the MIDI or sense that I need to adjust. It's just working with wave files. Okay, I don't have to worry about fixing these melody, or I don't know, or this note. Okay, in the mixing workflow, I don't worry about that anymore, because it's no longer unless I go back to the Reaper project, I can't edit anything. Okay, it's purely mixing now, right? So here's one of my preferences. Okay, when I import a stem, before I move on to the next step, I make sure the current stem is sitting right in the mix. Okay, that means EQing, compressing, or whatever processing is necessary to make it fit in the mix, both sound-wise and level-wise. Okay, once it feels balanced, I can move on to the next step. That is why, by the way, one plugin that I forgot to add to my mixing plugins is a kind of a metering plugin. Okay, I have to use a metering plugin whenever I'm doing mixing. This can either be the IK Multimedia's meter or the Isotope Insight 2. Like I said before, there is no right or wrong way of doing this. It's just your workflow preference. Okay. All right. This track is done. It's time to move on to another project. Will it be Trance? Maybe. Or maybe I'll try something completely different this time. Okay. The fun part is you never know until you dive in. So, like I said before, I have many projects that I've been working on. So I think I'll pick one of the projects and showcase